welcome back to the Mega Meeple, the show all about gamers and the games that bring them together. I am Tom.
I'm Al. Thanks for downloading us. We appreciate you taking the time to listen to our show.
And if you haven't already, you can subscribe to us on iTunes. And while you're there, be sure to put out some of that 5-star loving and leave us a happy review. It really helps us out.
And we are on all the different social networks, even the ones you can't even think of. Instagram. What else is out there, Tom? We got all kinds of stuff.
We got Twitter. We got Facebook. We got...
we're also available, as Tom indicated, on a website. We're at the www.themegameeple.com. That's all one word, themegameeple.com. And you can find some of the information about what we do here on that site.
Very good. So, without any further ado, let's whip up some mac and cheese, grab a Mountain Dew. Let's get on with the episode. All right, welcome back to the Mega Meeple. And, well, I think this is our first time recording we've got two proper mics, one for me, and Al, why don't you test yours out?
Testing 1, 2, 3.
All right.
Welcome to our professional equipment on the Mega Meeple podcast.
Yes. And thank you, those of you who have donated on Patreon and Pod Pledge and stuff like that. That certainly has made it a little bit easier to get these things. I mean, I had half of this stuff already because I have a little music recording studio that I'm putting together, so I already had a lot of this stuff. I just had to get an extra mic for Al. But yeah, now we're this is the first in-house or in-studio recording with the new stuff and new equipment. So we'll see how this works out. If you like how this sounds, let us know if there's something in it that because I'm kind of tweaking these things when I edit the episodes anyway. So if you have an idea of how these can sound better, let us know.
Yeah, and we appreciate the guys who've been both contributing to us through the process of putting some money in towards the group, but also just anybody who gives us suggestions and ideas and help us move forward in regards to stuff that you'd like us to talk about.
Definitely, because otherwise, the only way I could tell if someone is listening to these things is by the download numbers.
And since I download it 50 times, it kind of throws off the numbers a little bit. It's kind of like buying the newspaper when your name's in it, right? You got to get about 17 different newspapers.
Give one out to your mom and keep the rest in the box. But yeah, we encourage people to interact with us, and if you have any questions about gaming or anything, or what our favorite food is, I don't know, anything, let us know. We'll give you a shout out and answer it on the podcast. Because if we don't know the answer, then hey, we'll make something up.
That's right.
Fake it till you make it. Just you sound like you know what you're talking about. But but we encourage everybody to reach out to us through Twitter, the website, Facebook, anything like that, and all the links to that are on the website. So let's see, my goodness, what episode is this? 27 or 28? I'm losing track.
I think 28, but I'll have to double check.
Okay, let me. Episode 28. We get a hard cut there. Turn the recorder off and check the website to see. Yeah, when you get to a certain point, it's like it's like birthdays. You get to a certain age, it's like it's another day. You tend not to remember those stuff like that. At least for age, it's for a reason.
Yeah, as you get a little bit older, it becomes a little bit more difficult to remember what number follows the next one.
Or you get to the point where it's like, okay, well, you just told everybody you're 29. Yeah, you're 29. You've been 29 for the past 30 years. Come on.
As Patrice puts it, I'm 29 and holding it. Boy, it's starting to get real heavy.
But have the interview for this episode is Jamey Stegmaier. I recorded this interview, I think back in October, but he was, for those of you who remember, listened way back when, he was our very first guest on episode 3, and he is now our very first guest, two-time guest, and so he's going to be the interview for this episode. He's talking about Charterstone, because that's coming out less than a week now.
And that's, I guess, on the hotness now on the BGG, and
Yes.
and everybody's talking about it. It's like the big Christmas discussion. I'm really psyched to see it.
Yep, me too. I'm not one for much legacy games, but I think just because it's Jamey, I'm gonna get a copy of Charterstone and give it a shot. But he'll be talking about Charterstone. He'll be talking about Wind Gambit, which is as you know, the next expansion for Scythe, and he'll also be talking about. Evidently, there's a bit of a change or errata to Scythe on the combo of the factions and the player boards that you could pair up. Evidently, there's one pair that is broken, and I think one of my friends, as we were playing Scythe, discovered that broken, and he
Little OP, yeah.
he used it to the best of his benefit. But I mentioned a little bit later. He kind of, every time we play and he's one of the players, he's usually the one that wins, regardless of whether he's a new player or of something or not. So we hate him.
The other thing about Charterstone that's interesting is, despite the fact that it's legacy, it's replayable.
Yes.
And I think that's a great idea, a great marketing idea, because, a lot of people, you tell them about the idea behind legacy games, and it turns them off. The idea of, marking up a board or tearing things up. To some people, it feels like they feel like they've paid X amount of dollars, and now you're tearing it up and you can't play it again. And, I get that to a certain extent, although if you're playing it the X number of times that's necessary to play to get through the legacy, Seafall as an example, you play it roughly 20 times, you're getting easily well worth the what you paid for. But I still get the philosophy there. So the idea of kind of replenish, replace, and being able to kind of reset a campaign if you really enjoy the game, I think that's a great marketing move on Jamey's side.
Definitely. So stay tuned for the latter half of this episode. You'll hear that interview. So what the topic for this time is solitaire games. I know there's definitely a market for solitaire players. There are some games like Hostage Negotiator, which is strictly solitaire. It's a strict one person player game. And I've always been a big advocate of being social, getting out there and having fun, creating memories with your friends, and just getting away from like real life. I think that's why games and are like movies. It's an escapism. That's why I've never really enjoyed drama movies, because I figure I have enough drama in my life. I don't need to see it portrayed on a screen.
Yeah, and just like movies, it's a lot more fun to go with somebody else.
Yes.
The other thing I think that's true of like going to a game store is you gain the social aspect of playing with multiple players. I think one of the things that's great about board games versus video games, as an example, is that the board game is forging more of a social aspect than the video games tend to.
Definitely.
But, sometimes you can't get the people together. Sometimes, it's Wednesday night, you're in a mood for a game, but you can't get the crew to come over.
Right.
So, sometimes it's interesting to be able to break out of, a game of solitaire, play a couple of hands of that, or if you're looking for something a little bit more strategic or tactical, there's offerings that are out there that will allow you to be able to do that kind of play.
Yeah. And in fact, I know last night, in fact, my roommate Matt had Zombicide broken out, and he was playing 4 characters at the same time. And I think I think when all was said and done, he won. Of course he won because he was the only player.
Lost, and lost.
But he had said that everybody but one, when one of his character dies, he'd swap that with another in reserve type of thing. And he said only one character from the original lineup survived, and one character from that he pulled out from reserve survived, and everybody else died. So, but and that's why I think I like cooperative games more so, just because it has that potential that okay, well, if we can't get enough people to play a board game, then we could at least pull at and even for games that don't have a specific solo mode or variant that was written for it, you have the opportunity and ability for the co-op game to play it solo. You just play different various characters.
For example, Robinson Crusoe, where the reality is you're playing against the game system. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that, if you've only got two players and you didn't want to play one against the other, that's the kind of game that you could bring out for that purpose. But also, Crusoe could be played solo as well for the same reason, because you're up against the system, you're trying to survive. So that's an opportunity if you're looking for solo play as well.
Definitely. So, yeah, but why do you think that there's some in some people's mind that there might be like a stigma or some kind of preconceived notions of solitaire gamers that they I don't know, I've heard in the past where it's like if someone's talking about solitaire, basically the insult would be, you must not have many friends to play with, so you have to play by yourself, and no one wants to play games.
Well, that can be an issue, I suppose. But if you're a gamer that likes different kinds of systems and likes trying to, an example here would be like somebody who's like a chess player. Mm-hmm. Who wants to try to get the tactical side down and learn the best plays, the best practices. Well, solitaire play may be the best way to go. That way you're able to hone your skills and get better at the process. With the advent of computer games and video games, I think that aspect of being a antisocial situation is kind of alleviated to a certain extent, because a lot of games these days, even if you're playing multiplayer, you're the only guy in the room at the time. Mm-hmm. So from a game playing aspect, I think that's become less of a social stigma than it used to be.
Yeah, I think so. And but that's a good point as far as even before you want to start, especially if you're playing competitively, you want to try to get as much experience and gameplay under your belt, so to speak, that you can before you start taking it to the competition table.
Yeah, especially if you're looking at tournament play. If that's your aspect that you're looking towards, sometimes the best way to get better at the game is break out your best defensive ploy and then see what you can do against it. And hard for the other player to do that against you.
I think, and actually, I think a lot of people that would say that, I would question whether or not they're even part of the gaming community, that they wouldn't even know any better to not to say that.
Yeah. Are there any particular games, Tom, that you have played solitaire that you've particularly enjoyed?
Let's see. I know Mansions of Madness, I play solitaire, and that's a big help with the app.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we were talking about before, where you're, no matter how many players are playing, 1 to X, you're still playing against the system.
Yep. And now that the app for Imperial Assault has come out, I know I've been putting off that purchase for a while, because it's like, it's I think it's a one versus many thing of one person playing the Empire. Like, it probably won't get to the table very much. But now that the app is out, I guess I have to get it. I have no choice. Fantasy Flight Games have made that decision for me, and I now have to get at least the core box. So, Terraforming Mars is a rosy one to play solo.
Yeah, with a specific design element for that play.
Right.
And it really plays, in my opinion, very much differently than a 2 to 4 player version. When you're trying to work against the timing of the system, it creates a much more tight and difficult game, I think. Mm-hmm. When you're playing Terraforming Mars, which, of course, we've mentioned before, one of our favorite games here.
Yeah.
Another good one I like, I've always loved Mage Knight. And again, built to play against the system where basically you're, building a deck that allows you to do the different processes, and there's solo specific scenarios that are created for that purpose. But it's not solo only. It's also playable across multiple players.
Yep. And I think too, with Scythe, if you could handle the iconology or the icons and stuff like that for the tone.
The pictures.
The little pictures. I get the game for the pictures.
I like it for the articles, actually, myself.
Yeah, if you could, if the Automa doesn't throw you off too much, Scythe is a good one. And actually, they updated the Scythe Kick app, where it will actually, if you're playing one of the factions and assign an Automa to it, there is an extra screen on the app where it has the entire board laid out, and you're basically clicking where that particular worker is moving to, what hex it's going to, and stuff like that.
I've got to try that. I really like that game, but I play it very poorly. And I think having the opportunity to play it online with like we discussed, to kind of hone your skills, I think that would be very useful. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Another game that Tom's got here on his shelves of mini games is an old game that came out in the the early 80s, called Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, which was originally actually designed for play solo. Came out, like I said, back in the early 80s, and has had a reprint within the last couple or 3 years with a couple of add-on selections. And basically, in that game, you are solving a mystery, a Sherlock Holmes style mystery. From a solitaire basis, it's simple enough. You just simply collect the clues and try to resolve the questions and kind of get a score. When you play multiplayer, which you can, it's really just the two of you or the three of you being Sherlock all together, and kind of working together as a team to hopefully not miss a particular clue. Which boy, if you've ever played that particular game, after the first couple of scenarios becomes some difficult solutions.
Yeah, in fact, they had released. Yeah, Space Cowboys has, I guess about not too long ago, I think not even a month or so ago, released an app where it basically has an audio file of like a dramatization of the introduction for each of the cases. So rather than sitting there and reading 2 or 3 pages of the setup, you just go to this app and click whatever case you're working on, and you get sort of like this actor characterization drama of
oh, that's sweet.
What the setup for the case is.
I'll have to look into that one too. I hadn't heard about that one at all. That's fantastic.
It's pretty neat.
There's another one called the Lord of the Ring card game, which I know a lot of people are familiar with, that kind of uses the Lord of the Rings storyline and the way the structure of the card game is built can be played as multiplayer, but it's really as a working as a crew together, but it's also playable as a single element, trying to deal with a particular scenario that you're having to deal with at the time.
I heard I haven't played it, but I heard that's a real tough one to especially going up against some of the, I guess, the monsters or the bosses or something like that.
Difficult, yeah. And it's a living card game such that you're not required to, buy 14 billion cards in order to be able to play it well, kind of like Legend of the Five Rings, which has come out recently. But within that, you build a kind of starting crew that would hopefully be able to resolve itself through the adventure that you're going through.
Yeah. So yeah, my feel of that would be Arkham Horror, the living card game size. That's another one I like to play solo. And I'll just put together two characters and there's the two decks there and play through the scenario cards that they have coming out.
Another one I'd mention is I used to play war games back in the 80s, and there was a system called Ambush that came out through. It wasn't Avalon Hill. I think it was Victory Games at the time. I'll have to look back to check that. And it came out with a couple of scenarios, and it was World War II tactical, and fairly fascinating. Did a pretty good job of creating fog of war, because you would enter into a hexagon and maybe if you'll suddenly start taking fire and you'd have to decide what to do. It was kind of a play your own, pick your own adventure meets wargaming. And it was really fascinating. They did a pretty good job of it.
That's good. Yeah, so that's... what kind of solo games do you play? Let us know in the comments, or again, contact us through any of our social media outlets, and just let us know what kind of games you like to play solo, and we will share your answers. This will be like our question of the week type thing.
Yeah, if you're sitting there going, "You idiots, you forgot such and such."
Yeah, this is the time to pipe up.
That's right.
So, very likely it might be a game that we hadn't tried yet or even considered. So you'd be doing us a favor, and as well as everybody else, to throw your 2 cents in there and let us know what you think. What your favorite solitaire game is, or games if there's more than one. There's typically more than one.
All right, welcome back to the Mega Meeple, and we have it's a 2 times for a first. This gentleman was our very first guest on the podcast. I think it was episode 3, and here we are now, maybe a 2 or so dozen episodes later, and he is now our very first returning guest. So this is Jamey Stegmaier of Stonemaier Games. How you doing, Jamey?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me back on the podcast.
Thank you so much for your availability, and that's one of the things I really stood out about you and your company is that you're very active in the social media and interacting with the customers and the fans. That somebody could post a question about your game or a card with your game, and like sometimes within the hour you're in there posting the answer of somebody else answers, you're posting, yeah, that person's right, listen to them. That's very that's one of the things that really impressed me about you. It's like, okay, when I started seeing that, I was like, this was before I even got Scythe. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna check out this guy's games, because obviously he's very passionate about what he does, and he's very in touch with his fans. So yeah, I just appreciate you coming on. So my goodness. Well, Scythe, when was Scythe released? I want to say maybe like August or September of last year or something around there.
Yeah, Kickstarter backers received it, most of them in June or July, some a little earlier, some a little later. Then we had 1,000 copies at Gen Con last year, which was in mid-August, I believe. And then the retail release, I think it was right at that same time, like mid-August, maybe early September of last year. So we're talking now about 13 months later.
Wow, and it is still on the charts. It's still riding that wave, and it's I mean, you're looking at people's hot list and their top 10s or their favorites, and with Scythe, it's not one because a lot of games. with the cult of the new, there's a surge of popularity, and everybody's talking about it and talking about gaming and playing it. And then after a while, as other new games come on, it kind of goes into, on the back burner type of thing.
Right.
Except when an expansion comes out, then everybody starts talking about the game again. Scythe has stayed on everybody's radar for the whole time, from what I'm able to see, the whole year. It's usually between you and Scythe and Stronghold Games Terraforming Mars. So Scythe and Terraforming Mars are kind of like duking it out for supremacy on people's lists. But Scythe has been really holding its own. And I don't know if you know that. I think you mentioned a little bit this on your website, but there's actually people organizing Scythe tournaments. Yeah. There have been maybe a half dozen so far around the world, just people who want to play with at their local game store. They want to have a tournament, or maybe at a convention. There was a big one. I think probably the biggest one was at Gen Con this past year, where someone, Catherine, a fan named Catherine, created a pretty big tournament that had like a qualifying round, and then a single elimination after that. It was pretty cool to see. So it was after that I put up some kind of semi-official tournament rules on the website, just because it's neat to see. It's not a game like Magic the Gathering where tournaments are they don't really influence the sales of the game at all or anything like that. It's just kind of a fun thing that people do sometimes. Have you gotten to play in a Scythe tournament? Not yet. So I'm hoping my local store here would start doing that soon. So if not, I'm gonna drop a bug in there. Yeah. And so the invaders from afar have done well, and now we have, I guess we could say two things coming out for Scythe. Is of course the Wind Gambit. So let's talk a little bit about that first before we go on to the second one. Now this one introduces airships to all the factions, correct? That's right. Yeah. It came out of a Scythe fan in Germany, a guy named Kai Stark, made a fan expansion that had airships in it. And he play tested it a few times, and he posted the rules on the Scythe Facebook group. And I'd never really, I'd had some expansion ideas. Airships had never occurred to me. And the way he presented them, I thought was really clever, a really clever way to integrate a new type of unit into the game without disrupting all the other mechanisms that are already interlocking and interconnected. And so I went to Kai and I said, hey, I really love this idea. I'd like to work with you on building a real official expansion for this. So we ended up working together both on the airships and the other part, which is resolution tiles. Okay. Have you seen the airships? Have you seen the miniatures? I've seen the airships. What I think is pretty cool with that is there's a little section on the back of it, like on a little flat surface on the top, that you could actually put your workers and resources physically on the ship. That's right. Yeah, that was a tough thing to figure out. But pretty early on, Kai and I knew that we wanted airships to carry either. Well, actually, at first it was they could carry workers or resources, and then throughout the development, it depends on the game. So some games your airships will be able to carry resources. Some games they'll be able to carry workers. So it's one or the other. But we wanted people to be able to physically put them on the airship. So we had to balance the miniatures. It took a long time to figure out how to make sure that all types of resources would fit on the miniatures and that the airships wouldn't just fall over when they were loaded up. But yeah, we got it to work. Cool. Now the airships are not restricted or that they're by the lakes and the water. They're able to travel over the water and the lakes very freely. Yeah, they have no movement restrictions at all, and they don't occupy territories or control territories. They hover above territories, and what that amounts to some interesting mechanisms in that multiple airships can be on the same territory, or your airship can be hovering over a territory controlled by another player.
And that can, depending on the airship abilities in that game, that can lead to some interesting choices for players to figure out.
Okay. Now, how does there's two decks that come with the airships? I think aggressive and passive.
Yeah.
So how do those work, or how do those integrate with the gameplay?
Well, one of Kai's original ideas was that each airship should have a unique ability. And so for a while when we were playtesting it, we would kind of we had this big deck of airship ability cards, and we would deal them out to players, and every player would have their own. But we found that, and that evolved in a few ways. It got to the point where each player had 2 airship abilities. And we found that it was really hard, especially in larger group games, to keep track of all of that information. Like if my ability is different than yours, different than the next player's, like to see what all those abilities are doing and to remember it was a lot. And so in the last wave of playtesting, we realized the fix, and it worked really well, which is that at the beginning of every game, you shuffle we designated 2 different piles. There, like you said, there's an aggressive stack of abilities and a passive stack of abilities. And you shuffle those up, and you randomly draw one of each for the entire table. So all airships at the table share those abilities for that game. And it's kind of a challenge. Instead of figuring out how to maximize your airship ability versus a bunch of different abilities, you're figuring out how to use that common ability better than other players.
Okay.
It just makes it easier to keep track of all that information because it's just 2 new abilities, and it still adds quite a bit of variability and puzzling to each game.
All righty. And I understand that there's is there another set of deck of cards that I guess over and above and beyond the 6 stars that are being placed, there could be like another game-ending condition?
Yeah, those are the resolution tiles. That was kind of the thing that I brought to the expansion, although I was heavily involved in the design of the airships too. But the resolution tiles they feel a little bit like scenarios, but their purpose is to change the end game condition for each individual session of the game, and in a way that impacts the entire game and the end of the game, and sometimes the final score. So, for example, one of these tiles is the first player to have $40, 40 coins in the game. That triggers the end game. So it's kind of a race to be the richest in the game, and that triggers the end of the game. But many of the tiles, kind of as you mentioned, also have the normal end game trigger on there in some fashion, like something about 6 stars. It may not always be 6 stars and then the game ends. It might be 6 stars and then everybody takes it on their turn, or 6 stars and then this happens. That serves more of a backup in case no one ever gets $40, or if it takes hours and hours for someone to get $40.
Okay. Now you touched on something that reminded me of one. I didn't realize it until much later. Is that there's a variant for the is it Roosevelt faction? Yeah. So in the I know you're referring to at the end of the Wind Gambit rule book, I mentioned a few variants and one little piece of errata in the game, just so players are aware of it in printed form. It's on our website too, but I think it helps to get it in a rule book where you can see it officially. And for the Roosevelt faction, we found, despite all the playtesting we did before we released it, there ended up being one player map combination that just ended the game too quickly in a way that wasn't fun. And that combination is Roosevelt plus Industrial. And we also added that because for a while Roosevelt was, it's just an easier faction to play because you don't have a player map restriction. You could choose the same section every turn of your player map. And so the other official variant paired with that is that the Roosevelt player can't use their faction ability on their factory card if they have a factory card. It's really only for experienced players. If you're playing your first few games of Scythe, you're not going to know how to abuse that. But if you're a really experienced player, you can probably find a way to abuse that a little bit. So that'll slow Roosevelt down in a way that makes all of the factions competitive. Yeah, and I may have met the person that kind of throws a monkey wrench in that because we've been playing Scythe quite a bit the past few months, and the one night, quite a few weeks ago, we taught 2 new people, friends of ours, how to play, and that same night, this one particular person won, and then when we played it again, it's like, he's like, I want to play the Russians, so give me the Russian thing, and he won again. So I have a sneaky suspicion the combination he was used, because he's a really sharp guy. We get these Mansions of Madness with the app. We get these puzzles and stuff like that, and he's able to solve them within like 3 moves. So yeah,
okay,
yeah. So all right.
That's a little shady there. If he knew that, because that's a pairing that we've said do not play with this pairing if you played Scythe before. So, or maybe you said that was his first time.
Yeah, but yeah. So all right, I got some bad news for him.
Yeah. That win does not count.
That's right. All right. Now, also with the Invaders from Afar, the Wind Gambit coming out, and to accommodate all that, we have the Legendary Box, which I thought, I think you had a video of unboxing the box, and that must be a first. So.
Yeah, that's a unique product, and that's something I never thought I would make. But it started months ago where people asked me if I would ever make a more comprehensive storage solution for Scythe, given that I think it was when I told people that the Wind Gambit would not fit in the original game box.
Right.
And I was like, to me, it doesn't matter. Like, I like having the expansion boxes on my shelf. I have no need for a consolidated way to hold them all. But people were asking for it. And so I did a poll on my blog about it and was surprised to find that well over 1,000 people, maybe even 2,000 people wanted essentially an empty box to hold their Scythe stuff. So we ended up designing this big box, which is exactly the size of 2 copies of Scythe stacked on top of one another. And it's designed in such a way so that people who have the original Kickstarter box lid, which has foil on it, and it has maybe, collector's edition and a number on it that shows which number your copy is, you can take off the Legendary box lid, and the original box lid fits in exactly on top of the box where
okay.
So you can swap them out, or if you just want to toss one of them, you can. So we tried to design it in mind with people the Kickstarter backers, the 18,000 Kickstarter backers, and the many, many more people who have bought Scythe since then and just want a comprehensive storage solution.
Right. And I understand the people over at Broken Token has already announced that they are hard at work designing an organizer that will fit that Legendary box. Yeah,
we partnered. Not partners is a strong word. I appreciate everything that custom insert makers do for a game like Scythe, and so I purposely didn't put an insert in the box automatically. I wanted to support these other companies so that they could put their inserts in the box. Most of them are doing a modular approach to it, though. So if someone has already bought the Broken Token Scythe insert, they can add on the Invaders from Afar version, or they can add on the Wind Gambit version, or they can add on the final expansion version, and it'll all fit neatly in that box. But I definitely did not want to screw over those companies. I didn't want to screw over anyone who had already invested a lot of money in one of those fancy inserts. So I kind of worked with those companies to make sure they wouldn't require those people to buy a whole new thing just so it would fit in the big box.
Excellent. Yeah, just one more indication of you looking out for your fans and your customers. So you're a good man, Jamey.
Well, I know how much people have invested in Scythe. People have bought so many, the expansions, the accessories, and these third-party components. And that's been very important for me in my life, that people have spent money on that, and so I want to try to respect their budgets and their wallets as well.
Excellent. Well, I know I can speak for everybody saying that we thank you for that. I appreciate that very much.
That isn't the reaction I've gotten from everyone. There was a nasty comment today that I had to respond to about why I would sell an empty box to people. And it's unfortunate to read that. I know it was out of context. I don't know the whole story, but it's I appreciate your reaction because it's not what I always get when people hear that I'm selling a box like this.
No, yeah. So, yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah.
I can't please everyone. But,
right.
Well, let's move on to Charterstone, which is coming just around the corner. So how's the development for that?
Wow.
Yeah.
It was the design and development of the game took place. It was like an 18-month period. It was the longest and hardest game that I've had to design. And at this point, our factory has shipped some copies of it, and they'll ship the rest out of China in just about a week. China's on holiday right now as we're recording this on October 6th. So they'll ship out of China next week.
So we got...
so what do you know about Charterstone? Are you... Yeah.
I know not that much because I want to keep spoiler free and be surprised. But that's kind of thing is like, okay, I want to inform people and let them know what this is about, but I don't want to spoil the fun for myself. So I kind of at times like that I'll just have people like yourself on and say, okay, just share whatever you think needs to be shared and what people are allowed to know at this point. But the one thing I really like is that they're also made available recharge packs. So the people that once they get done with their board and they want to play it again from scratch or maybe with another group of people through the campaign, they could start at square one and make a totally different board.
That's right. Yeah, it's a 12. So Charterstone is kind of unique in two ways. One is that recharge pack, and other ways too people will discover. But it's a legacy game where you're building a village, but competing against other players. So you're sharing a village, but you're still competing. And the village itself that you're building, you're putting these building stickers on the board, and you're using them as worker placement action spots. And you can use anyone who builds something on the board. You can use their action spot with your worker. But and so there's a 12-game campaign that this plays over. So you're doing these permanent changes. There's a story that you impact, that you have power over. And then when the 12-game campaign ends, if you want, it is a fully functional worker placement game that you can continue to play as much as you want. So it's a legacy game that's designed to truly leave a legacy. You have your own special game that you can play as much as you want. But like you said, if you want to play the campaign again, or you want to play with new people, you want to just play it a different way, you flip over the board because it's double-sided, and you buy a $30 recharge pack instead of a whole another $70 copy of the game. And the $30 recharge pack contains everything that you permanently changed the first time around, except for the board, because you just flip over the board from the first time. And so you can play it through all the way through again as you wish. So I'm very curious to see how people respond to that. Like if they're eager to do it in the second campaign right away after doing the first one, or if they want to play with the finished game for a while, or if maybe they want to put it away for a while and try to forget about it and then come back after months or years to play it again. I'm curious to see how people play it like that.
Yeah, and I know I don't know how. I've just heard some rumblings thus far. I think people are going to wait until the game comes out, but I've heard some rumors and people arranging basically swap meets, where it's like, okay, you have you finished the 12-game campaign, you got your board, you play through it a few times. If you want to play like somebody else's board, you go to like a store or a friendly gaming store and try out other people's boards of what their board looks like when they finish the campaign. So,
yeah, I'm really curious to see how that turns out. Someone actually just started an ancillary Charterstone Facebook group yesterday for that specific purpose. Like for people who either want to trade or if they're just curious and they want to see what someone else's end of campaign board looks like. I think it'll be like a safe place to post photos. So I'm curious to see what happens there.
Yeah, that'd be interesting how that develops. Now, over the 12 game campaign, is it? I guess it would be ideal in a perfect world to have the same amount of group, in the same group all 12 times, or is there some leverage as far as if one person can't make it for like two of them or something like that, we could still play through the campaign without really missing step?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it plays 1 to 6 players, and it's designed to play well at all of those player counts during the campaign and after the campaign. But like you said, the ideal experience would be to play with the same people, at least during the campaign itself. But if you do have a group and say someone just knows they can't make it for a few games, or maybe you start off with 3 people and then someone else hears that you're playing it and they want to come in and play game 2 or game 3 and can play the rest of the campaign, it's very easy to add or drop players throughout the campaign. There's instructions right on the front of the rule book that are very simple. It just basically says add them in or let them drop out. And if you do add them in, just so they're competitive for the entire campaign, the rules kind of say just give them an equitable. It's a little hard to describe, but you kind of save victory points from game to game. And so the rules say if you add someone new, just give them an equitable number of victory points based on what other players have.
Okay.
Just so they can have a chance. Yeah, so it is very easy to add people in. And actually, one of the cool systems in it is the system designed to play solo also works for other player counts if you want it to. And so if you have someone who has been playing every game and they can't make it for one session, but they want their portion of the village to remain active during that game, they can actually let themselves be represented by the intelligent automa bot system in the game. So they can, it'll be as if they're there taking their turns doing stuff, but it'll be operated by a system of cards instead of the player. I don't know if people will actually use it all that much because it requires them to learn a new system just for that one player, just for that one time. But it's available if someone wants to do it.
Okay. There's one thing I'm not sure is all right. One thing I keep pushing is, the gaming thing is a social activity. So let's go out and be social. But I do understand, there's an aspect of solo gaming, and there's definitely a market out there for that. So are you able to use the Automa cards to play through the game solo, or would that be just too much to keep track of?
No, it's not even really a complicated system. You just reveal a card, and it'll tell you what the Automa player is doing on their turn. And so, typically, when you play a solo version of Charterstone, you can play against this one other Automa player, but ideally you'd play against 2 others, and so it'd be you against two intelligent bots. But you could even play against 5 others. I know Rado runs through. He plays most games with his wife, and they may have played against 4 bots. I think they played essentially a 6-player game, even though it was just him and his wife, and then 4 active bots playing all the other charters, which is a bit extreme. He didn't need to do that, and I wouldn't even recommend that most 2-player games do that, but they seem to really enjoy that experience.
Okay. So the Wind Gambit, the box, and Charterstone, what is you need to hear from the straight from the source. When is the release dates for these? At least planning at this point.
Yeah. Charterstone and the recharge pack for Charterstone will be released on December 12th in the U.S. and Canada. Probably a little bit earlier elsewhere in the world. The U.S. is a little behind there because of Thanksgiving and the impact that Thanksgiving will have on shipping. The Wind Gambit and the Legendary Box are scheduled for December 5th, but they're a little ahead of schedule. So they'll still be impacted by Thanksgiving, but I think they'll be released in late November instead of December 5th. We'll see if that actually happens. But December 5th is the latest for both of those.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jamey, for coming on once again on the podcast. Really appreciate it. And, you got to go create some more games so we can have you back on a third time.
Yeah, actually, right before you called, I was literally working on the third and last Scythe expansion. So that's exactly what I'm doing today.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to keep you any further. So thank you so much again, and so I don't talk to you before the end of the year. You have a good holiday, and looking forward to playing all those expansions and Charterstone that comes out.
Thank you, Tom, and keep up the great work on your end as well.
Thank you.
Take care.
Well, thank you so much for listening to the Mega Meeple. If you'd like to help us out with hosting costs for the podcast, you go to our Pod Pledge site and donate $1 or so every month. Really helps out.
Yeah, we also have a Patreon presence, and we'd be happy if you also help us out there.
And also, if you are a creator or game designer, or you have a new Kickstarter coming out, and you'd like to be a guest on the show to talk about your game, you can contact us through the website. Again, that's www.themegameeple.com.
So thanks for joining us. He's Tom.
He's Al.
And hope you'll join us again next week.